Okay, so here we go. We got Algebra 2, Unit 1, Lesson 3. Okay, so first we're going to go over some vocabulary that revolves around inequalities, how to solve an inequality in general, review the absolute value, and then we're going to put it all together. Last time from Lesson 2, we tried to solve an absolute value equation. Well, now we're going to do it with an absolute value inequality. So it's really taking things we already know and putting two things we know and putting it together. All right, so let's start out with some vocabulary and make sure we know where we should be. Okay, so there's four kinds of inequality symbols, so let's run through those. So here we have our less than symbol. All right, so here we have our greater than symbol. All right, so here, same symbol as the less than, but with the line under it, so that's going to mean less than or equal to. And then here's our greater than with the line under it, so that's going to be greater than or equal to. All right, so these are examples of scenarios. This is x is greater than 5. The way you'd read this is -3 is less than or equal to x, which keep in mind is the same thing as if I wrote x is greater than or equal to -3. Okay, here this would be read as 2x plus 3 is less than 9. This would be 4x minus 7 is greater than or equal to 9x plus 13. Okay, so then let's just go true, false on these statements to remember from absolute value and incorporating the inequality. So here this says 5 is greater than the absolute value of -5. Remember, the absolute value of -5 is just 5. So really, this statement is saying 5 is greater than 5. Well, no, that's not true. They're the same. They're equal, so that's false. Okay, here we have the same thing, except the difference is we have that or equal to sign. So again, the absolute value of -3 is 3. So this reads 3 is less than or equal to 3. Well, now that's true because we have that or equal sign under there. So we're going to write a true there. Okay, last but not least here, we have -1 is less than the absolute value of -4. So we're going to have -1 is less than, and the absolute value of -4 is 4. Well, is -1 less than 4? You bet it is. So that's going to be true. Okay? All right. So now let's look at and just remember how we solve and graph just a regular inequality, Algebra 1 style. So here we see 2x plus 3 is less than 9. So we need to isolate that x value. So I'm going to go -3 to both sides. So I get 2x is less than 6. I divide 2 to both sides. I get x is less than 3. So now to put it on a number line, here's my 3. We do want to have at least some orientation, so I'll put those other points there. Since it's a less than, it's an open circle, and then we need x is less than 3. So the numbers that are less than 3 are to the left. So that arrow is going to go to the left. Okay, now on this one, we have variables on both sides. For simplicity's sake, let's just always get the variable to the left, and then we can adjust what we need to from there. So we're going to minus the 9x to both sides, and that leaves us with -5x minus 7 is greater than or equal to 13. Okay, so now we need to solve for x. So we got a couple more steps. So add 7 to both sides, we're going to get -5x is greater than or equal to 20. Now we're going to divide by -5 on both sides, so that's going to give us x is less than or equal to -4. Okay, now let's put that on the number line. So here's my -4. Remember, since I'm in my negative numbers, this to the right, aka what's 1 greater than -4? -3. And 1 less than -4? -5. Because it's an or equal to, we're going to put a closed circle, and then that reads x is less than, so we're going to go to the left. Okay? All right, let's look down here. Okay. So remember what happened here? When I divided by a negative, I had to flip that sign. So just remember that from Algebra 1. All right, so now let's look at the graph. So now let's take the absolute value and the inequalities and let's put it together. So graph's absolute value inequality. So we're going to match the statement with the correct absolute value graph. So here we see that these two closed circles are both 2 away from 0. So we know we have to have a 2 involved there. So this answer doesn't make any sense there. So now it's not equal to 2 anymore, because if it was equal to 2, it'd just be a closed dot with no arrows. So why is this answer B here? Because from that value of 2, it's either an absolute value of 2 or it's greater, meaning it's further to the right or further to the left. So that's going to match up for us, okay? All right, so now what about here? Well, there are 2 open circles that are 3 away from 0, so we know it has to be based on 3, okay? But from 3 away from 0, they get what? Closer. In other words, less than. So we need an absolute value that is less than 3. Okay? All right, beautiful. So from here, what do we know? So let's talk about the shading and the circles. Okay? So for the shading, all right, if we have the absolute value is greater, okay, so when the absolute value is greater than a number, okay, then those lines are going to split apart. And when we have that absolute value is less than a number, those lines are going to connect or come together, okay? So what about the circles? When it's a greater than or less than, you just have this, which we would call an open circle. And what that means is it does not include that answer, okay? When it's a greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, it's a closed circle, okay? And that means it does include that answer, okay? All right, so let's look at it. Here it says the absolute value of m is greater than 5. So what does that mean? So it means that m is either less than -5, so we flip the sign of both the sign of the number and the sign of the inequality, or m is greater than 5. So let's look at it here. The absolute value of w is less than or equal to 3 is equivalent to w is flip the sign, greater than or equal to -3 or less than or equal to +3. Okay, so we flip the sign of the number and the sign of the inequality. All right, so now as we get into actually solving one here, then let's take a look at what this is going to look like, okay, and make sure we see what we're doing. So notice, get the absolute value by itself. This is just like what we were doing from the last lesson with the equation. In this case, this should be considered simpler because the x plus 5 is already isolated. So we split into two equations. The first one, or two inequalities. The first one, we bring it straight down and drop the absolute value bars. Otherwise, it stays exactly the same. Okay, for the second one, we keep what was in the absolute value the same. So notice the x plus 5 here and here are exactly the same. You're going to then switch the inequality sign and the sign of the number. So instead of being a less than, now it's a greater than. Instead of being a 4, now it's a -4. And now we're going to solve Algebra 1 style like we did on the front for both the inequalities, which means we just minus 5 to both sides. Well, 4 minus 5 is -1. -4 minus 5 is -9. Okay, now we're going to graph this just for practice sake. So I'm going to put my -1 here, put my -9 here. If you want to toss 0 just so you know where it is, cool. Okay. There's no line underneath it, or in other words, an equal to. So therefore, they got to be open circles. Okay, so an open circle over -9, an open circle over -1. Now, the way this is read is x is less than -1, x is greater than -9. So we need greater than -9, less than -1. So these lines are going to come together. So that's what that should look like. No arrows in the middle. You understand because they're connected that means it includes all the values between those. Okay? All right. So now let's just try one here where we actually have to do all the steps, and then you should go through and do all the practice. So I need to get that absolute value alone. So I see that absolute value. If it helps you, you can even just go like this. Hey, that's what I need. So what's on the same side of the absolute value as the, on the same side of the absolute value, but is not inside it? Well, it's that -1. So we need to add 1 to both sides. So when we do that, we're going to get less than -10 plus 1 is -9. And now we're going to split into the two inequalities. Okay? So we're going to get the absolute value, x plus 2, is less than -9. Okay? So x plus 2 is less than -9. Okay? And then x plus 2 is greater than +9. So we flipped the sign from less than to greater than, we flipped the number from -9 to +9. Now we're going to solve it. So -2 minus 2, x is less than -11, -2 minus 2, x is greater than 7. So initially it looks like those are our two scenarios, okay? Now, that being said though, the actual scenario here, when I'm going to look through it, okay, I solve through with this one. So now, if I put this on a number line, we'll show why this one's a tricky one. So here's -11, and here's 7. So this is both, there's no or equal to, so it's open circles. This says x is less than -11, so we go to the left. This says x is greater than 7, so we go to the right. So let's just check this, okay? So we're going to do a check. So I'm going to switch colors to emphasize I'm doing the check. Let's pick a number that's greater than 7, okay? So how about 10? 10 is greater than 7. So that's on the line. It should work. Okay, so I'm going to take my 10, I'm going to substitute it back in here. So here's what that should look like. 10 plus 2 absolute value minus 1 is less than negative 10. Well, 10 plus 2 is 12, and the absolute value of 12 is 12 minus 1. So 12 minus 1 is 11, okay? Well, this would read 11 is less than negative 10. Was 11 less than negative 10? No, it's not. So this actually would be rejected, okay? And the same thing happens here, and here's why. This answer actually has no solution, okay? And the reason that we would have known that, if you're careful, is up here it says that the absolute value of something is less than a negative. If you remember, that's impossible, right? Our absolute value can't even be equal to a negative. Forget about be less than. So again, as you go into the practice, make sure you're careful with all these tricky ones, okay? So go through those practice, check with all the keys. Hope this helps.